All right, so let's get right into this morning's briefing for still Tropical Storm Beryl, likely soon to become a hurricane. Tropical Storm Beryl is getting better organized this morning over the Gulf of Mexico, as expected. We are looking now for landfall near or perhaps just east of Matagorda Bay. This is a little bit of an eastern shift compared to yesterday. It's currently a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm, not 60, and Beryl is forecast to make landfall as an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane, a Category 1, but we should prepare for perhaps a Category 2 landfall. The Hurricane Center made mention of this this morning again, so but it is a good rule of thumb to go one category higher in general when thinking about preparing. Tropical storm warnings have now been extended for all inland counties that were previously uncovered by wind-related warnings, and so you'll be getting those tropical storm warnings. You probably already have for the inland counties. The other wind-related watches and warnings, including hurricane warnings for portions of the coastal areas, are unchanged, and I'll show you maps of these in a moment. The other change here, the flood watch has been expanded to include the entire forecast area as well. No changes have been made this update to the storm surge related watches and warnings, and I'll show you all these in a moment. The rainfall forecast remains about the same. Pretty widespread, 5 to 10 inches of rain is expected, with local amounts up to 15 inches where the heaviest bands occur. Still concerned, of course, about rip currents, elevated seas, of course, with the storm surge related warnings, and a few tornadoes possible in bands really starting now. You know, we have some bands coming on shore. You know, the threat will increase somewhat this afternoon and continue into Monday morning. Here's a look at radar as of about an hour ago, showing that big swirl over the southwest Gulf. The center of circulation. We have a sort of what we call a partial eye wall, not yet closed off. Hurricane Center noted that once that thing gets closed off a bit, that's when we might see a more rapid intensification. You also see the spiral bands emanating out of that center area. And in fact, we have a spiral band already, even this morning. Passing over southeast Texas. You can see more of those offshore. Another change from yesterday at this time is it does appear to be a much larger storm. You can see that in the wind observations on this map. The wind gusts are in red. It's a quite large circulation. So, you know, what that means for our area is a larger wind impact footprint, more areas to get high winds, and also potentially more storm surge, being a larger circulation. This is just one model's view showing the progression from midday today through midnight Monday night. And don't focus on the details here of the track or even of the rainfall pattern, but it does give you a general sense how this storm is forecast to lift north. You can see the spiral banding involved in it, also the track of the center. And both of those will carry some severe weather. Of course, high winds near and around that center track, also gusty winds, tornadoes potentially in the banding coming off that. So, but you do get the idea. It is a fairly steady mover as well, lifting north about 10 miles per hour. And of course, heavy downpours both near the center and in the spiral band. So that's why we have that flood threat. Here's a look at the latest forecast. I'm showing here a 3-day track cone. As it's moving so quickly, days 4 and 5 really don't matter. You can see it making landfall after midnight tonight, maybe 2 a.m. or so. Again, near or just east of Matagorda Bay as a Cat 1 hurricane, potentially a Cat 2. Now that slight eastward shift does put Brazoria in the highest impact area as well. So that's why you see the hurricane warning has been extended to cover that county also, in addition to Jackson and Matagorda. I do, in the inset, I have sort of a close-up of the cone, and I think it's useful here because, you know, we can get shifts in the center track, and you see a right of cone track, even this close in, would take it over western Harris County. So bottom line is these wind impacts can be significant, certainly will be at the coast, but also inland, even in some pretty populated areas, should that track follow the right-hand side of that cone. You can see Sugar Land and Houston on the map there, but also Matagorda Bay, like we've been talking about for quite a while, and counties over our southwest areas. Also on this map, you can see the hurricane warnings in red along the coast from Baffin Bay to San Luis Pass, tropical storm warnings from San Luis Pass to High Island, hurricane watch and tropical storm warning together from San Luis Pass through Galveston Island. Now, what does that mean when there's a hurricane watch and tropical storm warning together? It means that high confidence of tropical storm conditions, a possibility yet of hurricane force winds, even on Galveston Island. So that's why you have that combination there. Now, those wind hazards do extend inland, of course. I apologize, there's a little bit of an overlap on this, the way this turned out of these images. I'll fix that before I send this out. But on the left, you can see again, all of our inland counties now are under a tropical storm warning. This is due to the larger wind field now from this tropical storm, soon to become a hurricane. Bigger wind footprint, and so it made sense to expand the warning over the whole area. The brighter color red, those are the areas we're most concerned about hurricane force winds. You know, we could be talking about 85-mile-per-hour sustained with higher gusts, potentially gusts over 100 miles per hour in those brighter red areas, including the coastal waters, coastal Brazoria, Jackson and Matagorda counties. And, you know, even inland Brazoria could see some hurricane force wind gusts at least. And so, you know, there's still maybe some refinement to this wind hazard map. Storm surge warning on the right in the darker shading, that extends really across our whole area now, looking at either 3 to 5 or 4 to 6 feet of water above ground level. And I'll show you a bit more on that. So really, this is an all hazards kind of event, damaging winds, flooding rains potentially, some storm surge in the coastal areas, and tornadoes. All those hazards are on the table. Most likely arrival of tropical storm force winds. This really hasn't changed a whole lot in these briefings. Really looking like this evening. We're going to see those tropical storm force winds arrive. Could be either early or later this evening. Later as you go further inland, perhaps overnight as you get well inland. And I wanted to focus in on these wind probabilities a little bit better here. This is a feature of HurrAvac. Again, I keep pushing that tool for a good display of all these different fields. On the left, we have the wind speed point probabilities for 39 mile per hour or greater sustained. That's what we have on the left. So that's tropical storm force winds. And you can see pretty much, you know, very high for our whole area. You know, certainly the highest, say from Houston to Sugar Land down to the coast. So it's a pretty safe bet. You know, we're looking at some very strong winds, even in the greater Houston area, not just on the coast, greater than 39 miles per hour. And I also picked greater than 58 miles per hour sustained. So think about that. You know, we're talking about the types of winds where you can have power outages and so on. And even there, you can see those higher probabilities, certainly greater than 50%, on into the city of Houston, the western side of Harris County, down on to Matagorda Bay, and over even to portions of Galveston County. So bottom line is it's going to be a big wind event, likely some impacts on power systems and others. And then, can be significant wind damage down in that hurricane warning area especially. Not to mention tree fall. Storm total rainfall, as we've talked about, 5 to 10 inches, locally higher amounts. We're already getting some rain from the rain bands on the leading edge, and then a more steady, heavier rain coming in tonight and tomorrow morning, moving from south to north across the area. The heaviest rain sort of near and right of the track in general, but there will be banding east of the path, so we think it's justified to have really all areas in the flood watch for this one. Focusing on the flood hazard again, on the left-hand side, you see the risk levels for flash flooding as determined by the Weather Prediction Center. And you can see a fairly large area of moderate risk. It's possible that might be expanded a bit. And on the right, you can see the flash flood watch that we have put out, including everyone in our forecast area. Storm surge flooding, again, on the left, you can kind of see a big picture view of the areas that could be inundated. On the right is the peak surge values determined by the surge unit at the Hurricane Center. So we're looking at 3 to 5 feet around Galveston Bay and between San Luis Pass and Sabine Pass, 4 to 6 feet above ground level between San Luis Pass and Mesquite Bay, including Matagorda Bay, and Galveston 3 to 5 feet as well. So this is not relative to mean lower low water, just to be clear. This is above ground level. A rough conversion for Galveston Bay would be to add a foot to that, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And as I said yesterday with HurrEvac, you can really zoom in on different areas to look at the potential flooding on a map. And you can view that with or without what's called a tidal mask. You can see two versions of that. The left is without that tidal mask. The right in gray is an overlay that's supposed to filter out marshy areas and places with very little habitation. So both of those can be useful. The hatched area that you see there is levied, and so there's no prediction made inside the levee. Focusing in on the Freeport area, just again to give you a sense of the utility of HurrEvac, the ability to zoom in. And again, on the left, you can see the depth of water above ground from storm surge flooding. On the right, you have the same fields, but with this mask applied. So on the left, you see some browns there indicating greater than 6 feet above ground. But with the mask, you see that's mostly going to be marshy area. And then finally, looking around Matagorda Bay, if you look at the right-hand side of that, you can see Matagorda Beach and some of the high water there up to the roadway, and then out on the barrier island. So again, get into HurrEvac, or you can look online if you don't have access to HurrEvac, and zoom in to your location to get more details. I did want to include this map as well. In the upper left, you see Galveston Bay entrance. You can see some values now ranging up to 6 feet above mean lower low water. You can see that's trended up. And again, so I think that 6 feet above mean lower low water, corresponds to sort of 3 to 4 feet of surge. And we could have even another foot on top of that. So, I'd be prepared for 6, maybe even a little bit higher around Galveston Bay. And then the San Luis Pass, don't pay any attention to the numbers there. Focus more on the timing, which is a bit of a rise today with some rain wave run up, and then the peak being tomorrow, especially in the morning. That'll be the most difficult time for inundation due to storm surge. Tornadoes, risk starting now really in this banding as these bands lift up toward the area. That includes tonight, and on the right hand side you see the risk area for these brief tornadoes tomorrow. Focusing now on the wave heights, you can see sort of a daily snapshot of the wave heights out over the Gulf. Today you can see those 20 to 30 foot seas offshore, and you can see in general those high seas push into the coast. So we're going to see some really increase in the waves and the surf, as well as some wave run up starting really this afternoon. And the worst of it, like we talked about with the water levels, probably tomorrow morning with both high surge and waves on top of that on the beaches. And then improving conditions as we get into Tuesday. Just to sum up, looking at some of those high seas coming in this morning, we're seeing at the offshore buoys evidence of some of these high waves starting to work their way to the coastline. Looking at 15-foot seas this afternoon in the nearshore waters. Peak seas perhaps 20 to 30 feet offshore near the mid-Texas coast. And then improving conditions, especially nearshore Tuesday morning. Onset of tropical storm force winds, we've already covered that for the most part this evening for the coast. Hurricane force winds would come in tonight, especially in those hurricane warned areas. And then improvement on Monday afternoon and evening as we showed that the system lifts north out of the area. Now, a little discussion of river forecast. I see we've had some questions actually about that. What I'm going to do now is have Katie speak to that. Katie, are you on the line? Talk a little bit about the river?
Yes. Okay. Yes, Dan, can you hear me?
Yes, sure can.
Yeah, so we went ahead and coordinated with the River Forecast Center to go ahead and use 48 hours of storm total rainfall in the forecast for this morning. So what you're seeing on the screen are the updated river forecast using 48 hours. You can see we've got the widespread action to minor river flooding expected that we were talking about yesterday, with some isolated, moderate, and major down in Lavaca-Navidad River Basin. So right now we are focusing on the Lavaca-Navidad as well as Tres Palacios in San Bernard. However, we do need to monitor the tributaries of the Brazos and Trinity River as well as the San Jacinto Houston bayous for any of the training bands, any heavy rainfall embedded within those bands. As far as timing goes for expected river flooding, we are expecting the river flooding to begin early tomorrow morning. And then extending into late week, especially where we do have some of the heaviest rainfall falling. Again, the river flooding threat is going to be centered more towards where the heaviest rainfall is set up, but we're not out of the woods yet on some of the locations further away from the actual track of the storm. As far as inundation maps go for these locations, they are updated on the new NWS website. If you have questions about those inundation maps, please let me know. But as we get closer, we'll start taking a look at any of those potential impacts from the inundation maps. With that, I'll pass it back over to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And Katie will be standing by for any questions as well during the Q&A session. So just to finish up, the track forecast has shifted slightly eastward compared to yesterday, with a potential landfall along Matagorda County or still perhaps Matagorda Bay. But we still may see additional shifts in the track. Beryl is a tropical storm, now a strong tropical storm, but forecast to strengthen to a hurricane before landfall. Best practice for this one is to plan for one category higher than forecast. A category 2 landfall is possible. Again, that would require some rapid intensification as we're within maybe 15 hours of landfall. Flood watch has been expanded to cover the entire area for flash flooding, and as Katie mentioned, there's some river flooding concerns also. For wind-related warnings, we've expanded that as well to cover all the inland counties that were not covered previously. Hurricane warnings remain in effect for Jackson, Matagorda, coastal Brazoria. A hurricane watch also for Galveston Island, given the potential of a shift just a bit further east would bring hurricane force winds there as well. And then the isolated tornado threat that we've talked about. Confidence is fairly high, but there's still some things that may happen and change quickly. The rapid intensification, even a 10-mile shift to the east would bring some much higher winds, for example, into the Houston area. So there's a lot of things still to work out, and so it's important to stay tuned.